yeah, yeah. The Amero, the Amero, the Amero. Take me.
Episode 2, Who Really Pays for Government Debt? Season 2, North America Under Pressure. Welcome back to the table. Imagine a politician standing at a podium today, smiling for the cameras as they sign a massive new infrastructure and stimulus bill. To fund it, the government issues a 30-year sovereign bond. Now, listen to that baby crying in the maternity ward. That child has just been born. Over the next 30 years, as that child grows up, goes to school, gets their first job, and tries to save for their first home, a portion of every single paycheck they earn will be siphoned away through taxes and inflation. Why? To pay the interest on the debt that was signed today for a project they had no vote in and may never actually benefit from. A government borrows today. An entirely different generation lives with the constraint. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of the Amero Digital Bridge to the FinTech Future. I'm your host, Chisun Lee. We are continuing our journey through Season 2, North America Under Pressure. Today, we are tackling the $37 trillion elephant in the room. We are asking, who really pays for government debt? We are going to dissect how public debt actually works. We are going to avoid the lazy metaphors politicians use and look at the hard macroeconomic realities, debt issuance, interest costs, rollover risk, and the devastating distributional effects of inflation. We will explore the critical counterargument that sovereign debt, when used correctly, is actually vital for our survival. Finally, we will face a hard truth about the digital Amero. Upgrading our technology does not erase our fiscal reality. If you watch the news, you will often hear pundits say, the government needs to manage its budget, just like a family manages its household credit card. As an economic educator, I need you to completely erase that analogy from your mind. It is simplistic and it hides how power actually works. If a family cannot pay their credit card bill, they go bankrupt. A sovereign government that issues its own currency does not go bankrupt in the same way. Why? First, a government never actually pays off its total debt. It simply issues new debt to pay off the old debt, a process called rolling over. Second, if nobody wants to buy that new debt, the government has a magical tool the family does not have. The central bank can simply print the money to buy it. But just because the government doesn't go bankrupt like a household doesn't mean the debt is harmless. The consequences just take a different, more insidious form. To understand this, we have to look at the macroeconomic concept of rollover risk and what economists call fiscal dominance Mark II. When a government accumulates massive amounts of debt, much of it is short-term debt. This means the government constantly has to go to global investors and ask them to roll it over, to buy new bonds so the government can pay off the maturing ones. If a country has $37 trillion in debt, and investors suddenly lose confidence in that government's ability to manage its economy, those investors will refuse to roll over the debt unless they are paid massively higher interest rates. Suddenly, the cost of servicing the debt skyrockets. The government has to spend so much money just paying interest to bondholders that they are forced to slash funding for hospitals, universities, and infrastructure. If the interest rates get too high, the government forces the central bank to step in. The central bank creates money out of thin air to buy the government debt and keep the system from collapsing. But when you flood the economy with newly printed money without creating new goods and services, you get inflation. This is the ultimate answer to our episode's question. Who pays? You pay. Economists call this seigniorage, or more bluntly, the inflation tax. It is a hidden, regressive tax. The government gets to spend the newly printed money first at its current value. But by the time that money trickles down to the youth and the working class, the prices of rent, food and energy have surged. Inflation violently transfers wealth away from people who hold cash, savings, and wages, and transfers it to the biggest debtor in the room, the government. But here is where we must pivot to the counterargument. Because debt is not inherently evil. In fact, sovereign debt is one of the most powerful tools ever invented by human civilization. Governments must have the ability to borrow. As economic research shows, sovereign debt is absolutely necessary to finance productive investments. If a government borrows $10 billion to build a high-speed rail network or a revolutionary new energy grid, that infrastructure will generate massive economic growth for the next 50 years. The future generation that has to pay the interest on that debt will easily be able to afford it because the investment made them vastly wealthier and more productive. Furthermore, sovereign debt is required to stabilize crises. During the 2008 financial collapse or the recent global pandemic, if governments had not borrowed trillions of dollars to keep businesses afloat and pay workers who were forced to stay home, the global economy would have spiraled into a devastating depression. The problem is not the existence of debt. The problem is the quality of the spending. As critics of modern fiscal policy point out, the social contract breaks down when governments borrow mountains of money not for productive future-building infrastructure, but to fund inefficient bureaucracy, wage wars, or temporarily prop up failing systems just to win the next election. When we borrow for consumption today instead of investment for tomorrow, we are stealing from the youth. And this brings us directly to the future of North America and the digital Amero. In the blockchain and crypto space, there is a dangerous utopian fantasy. People believe that if we just move to Bitcoin or XRP or a tokenized financial system, all of our economic problems will vanish. They will not. Digital finance does not erase fiscal reality. If North America transitions to an interoperable digital Amero framework, settling transactions in milliseconds on a transparent ledger, we will eliminate billions of dollars in banking friction. But if the US, Canada, and Mexico continue to run massive, unproductive structural deficits, the math will eventually catch up with us. This is why the design of any future monetary union must include institutional discipline. If we look at the European euro, we saw what happened when countries shared a currency but lacked fiscal discipline. Countries like Greece accumulated massive debts, lost investor confidence, and because they could not print their own money, they were forced into brutal austerity, slashing pensions and youth employment to survive. A digital Amero framework must avoid this trap. It requires monetary design that encodes transparency. With programmable digital money and real-time ledgers, citizens could actually track exactly where sovereign debt is being spent. Are the bond funds being deployed to build productive North American infrastructure, or are they disappearing into a bureaucratic black hole? Technology cannot force politicians to be responsible, but it can make their irresponsibility mathematically visible to the voters. Before we close today, let's bring this back to the table with our weekly Q&A. Question 1. If the government owes debt to its own citizens through pension funds, doesn't it just cancel out? This is a great question about distributional effects. It doesn't cancel out because the people paying the taxes are not always the same people receiving the interest. If you are a young worker who doesn't own any bonds or assets, you are paying high taxes and suffering from inflation to service the debt. The interest payments on the debt are largely flowing to wealthy investors, massive institutions, and older generations who hold the bonds. Debt redistributes wealth from the young and the working class to the asset-owning class. Question 2. What is rollover risk in plain English? Imagine you have a 1-year business loan for $100,000. At the end of the year, you don't have the cash to pay it off, So you ask the bank to give you a new loan to cover the old one. That is rolling over. But what if the bank looks at your struggling business and says, "No, we don't trust you anymore. We will only roll it over if you pay 20% interest instead of 5%. Suddenly, your business collapses just from the interest payments. Governments face this exact same risk with global bond investors. Question 3. What is the call to action for today? We have established that borrowing to build the future is good, but borrowing to mask inefficiency is destructive. So, I want to ask you a hard, real-world question. If our governments are forced to manage this debt crisis, what is the one area of public spending that must be protected at all costs? And what is the one area that should be cut? Drop a comment below and let's debate the reality of our shared budget. I'm Chisun Lee. Thank you for seeking the truth behind the money. I will see you next week on the Amero.